Morning, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. Oh, I didn't do one thing here. So welcome to the Filmmakers Life. This is a podcast for filmmakers. Filmmakers are the most creative and hardworking people I know, and yet they often find themselves spinning their wheels and stuck. We were just talking about that. This podcast is designed to show filmmakers how to move forward no matter what, why, or how long they have been stuck. I help filmmakers gain the information they need so they can raise enough money to create powerful films that change the world and make money. If you need to raise money to make your films, if you want to produce, write, and direct your own films, you have come to the right place to learn how to do that. And welcome again to this Filmmaker's Life. So my guest today is Mike Camoin, and I'm really happy to have this opportunity to get to know Mike a bit better and learn more about his work. And you will too. And thank you so much for coming, Mike.
Oh, what a pleasure, Joanne. Thank you for inviting me and the opportunity to I'm looking forward to wherever we go with this and share my
Well, no, thank you for coming. And, my first question that I always like to ask is, when did you first know that you were a filmmaker?
Well, that's a great question. And I want to just turn that around a little bit and say, when did I know I was an artist? And I want to share a story which related to my Italian side of my family. My mom, we're in Easton, Pennsylvania.
Wait, you know what, Mike? Camoin. What kind of an Italian name is that?
That's French. And
So it was originally Camoin? Camoin?
yes. And Camoin
Ah,
comes from Marseille, and there's a village called Camoin in
uh-huh.
Marseille.
But
And
they wouldn't say Camoin in France,
no,
right? They
Camoin.
would Camoin, Camoin. Okay,
That's
okay. Yes. All right. Sorry. Back
so.
to
Well,
the
let me just,
Italian, the
while we're staying there,
Italians.
before we go to
Okay.
the Italian thing,
The French side.
around my dinner table, my dad would tell us stories about the famous Charles Camoin, the French painter, part of Le Fauve. He
Oh,
was friends with Matisse. And I have
oh.
since researched how I'm connected to Charles Matisse, who painted flowers and nudes and things like that at the turn of the 19th century. And so, you start to hear things like, well, we're connected to them, but we're not. It's like, well, what is it? Are we artistic or not? And
Uh-huh.
now back to Easton, Pennsylvania. My mother's uncle has died. I am 4 or 5 years old,
Huh.
and all I asked for was a piece of loose leaf paper and a pencil.
Huh.
And about an hour later, my mother's cousin comes around and she sees that I've sketched a Hummel almost identical to what's on the stand there in my relative's house. And everybody hold it up and make a big deal out of it. I was just left alone dealing with people who are crying and grieving, and I created something that distracted them.
Mm.
And it was at that moment that I was like, it was embarrassing to be the center of attention like that.
Huh.
But it was then that I knew like I was artistic. My parents put me in art classes with my friend Matt down the street, and we studied with Mrs. Lerner each summer. And then I would go to other family gatherings where my mom's side of the family would gather around the piano, and my cousin
Mm.
Cookie would
Mhm.
play. And here now I am like 9, 10 years old, and I sat there for 4 hours. And he turns to my parents and he says, there's nobody else here sitting next to him. I think you ought to get him a piano. And that was a big purchase.
Oh,
But
yeah.
by the time I was 10, 11, there was a piano in my living room, and I was studying piano.
Mm.
And so, I share those stories because how do we know that we're anything other than people observing that in us. And I also remember one more story is in terms of storytelling as a Catholic, Christmas and the nativity scene is a big deal. And I was the kid who put the Good Shepherd and Jesus and Mary and the Lamb, and I had to arrange them and I'd rearrange them, always resetting. And that was my role every Christmas, was setting up the nativity. I was being a director. And I was having people face a certain way so that they could see each other. Now, where it really began for me,
Mike, I just want to say my I don't have any of those experiences. Oh, that's not true, I guess, because when I was 8, I taught myself to read music and play the recorder. And then my father got me a flute. And so I started playing the flute. And then I said I wanted to play a saxophone. He said, women don't play the saxophone. So I got a guitar. I was very miffed about that. And later on, I played the drums.
wow.
So I'd forgotten about all of that. Yeah.
You know, music's such a big part of what the left side of the brain that just helps us be creative and think in different
right.
So
yeah, I did get, like you said about being observed, you know, oh, here's something that she seems to like, let's have her do more. Yeah.
So the turning point for me, though, to venture into independent filmmaking was, I fast forward to, I'm in my 20s, I'm studying for my master's in social work.
What was your undergraduate degree in?
It was in English with a minor in business.
Me too. Oh.
But I always wanted to be in the communication school. Seriously, like, and I just, you know, what are you going to do with that? You know? So here I am.
I didn't know in undergraduate. It wasn't until I got to graduate school that I was like, well, I want to be over there in the communication school.
Exactly.
Did your parents literally say, what are you going to do with that? If you went
with an English degree, yes.
Oh, with an English degree,
because they understood I was a business major going in, and I'm like, this doesn't speak to me. You know, I was a B plus student, but I really wanted to be reading literature and things like that. Even though I was a very slow reader, I had a learning disability. I didn't discover that I had ADD until I was 32. And I helped create the first adult ADD video in the country.
Really?
Dave Gawork, yes. And
what's it called?
Me, myself, and my ADD coach.
That's great. That's great. I discovered I had ADD when I was in my 50s, I think.
You know, there's something added to this. You know, the ADD is added dimension, but until we figure out how to manage ourselves, we don't know how to organize our creativity. And that was a blessing to discover. So here's how we discovered I had ADD. As a social worker, I organized my files by priority, not alphabetically, but
that makes sense. That makes sense to me.
You know, to me too, but nobody else who came in next could follow.
No, that's true. That's true.
Follow my logic.
So that's true.
So it was.
I can see that.
It was really helpful to get that diagnosis and read books about that, and now I see it in nearly every creative person who's.
Do you know how I found out I had ADD? I was meditating one day, and a voice said, "You have ADD." I was like, I do not.
That's it.
You know, but the voice was very clearly the voice. So I went and got tested, and I had ADD off the chart. And in fact, when I went to, they had this class. So I went to this class, and the doctor had a whole list of symptoms of ADD, long list. And she's going through every symptom, and I'm like, I don't have that. I don't have that. I don't have that. I don't have that. And then she got to this one and it said hyperfocus. And I was like, excuse me, but I have hyperfocus, but that's not ADD. I thought that was the opposite of ADD. I thought ADD was that you couldn't focus. And she said, no, it's definitely a symptom of ADD. And I said, but I'm a grant writer and I have built my entire career around my ability to hyperfocus. And she said, well, when you turn in the grant, is your life, the rest of your life, a complete wreck? I said, yeah, absolutely, of course. And she said, well, you might want to look into doing something else.
Oh.
And that was, my life just completely, fell apart in that moment. That's why I now teach. I mostly am not on a deadline. I don't run my life like that anymore. But that was my entire life, was the next deadline, the next deadline, the next deadline, being up all night, all of that stuff. And then, yeah, I would turn in the grant and, the place was a wreck. There was no food in the fridge,
Well, that's it, because we're so hyper-focused. We just we don't even care what time it is,
No.
So can I tell you an ADD story, a tip that
please.
I got? And this is how I wrote my first screenplay. At that time, it was so crazy.
Oh, screenwriting tips, ADD screenwriting tips. That's great.
So if you exercise for 14 minutes straight, serotonin is then released in your brain, which calms you down. So my ADD coach said, get on your bike, put your backpack on, put your laptop in, bike around. I biked to a cafe, then pulled out the laptop where I could sit for 2 hours and write 10 pages. I did that for a month straight, and I had my screenplay. But you have to balance the exercise in beforehand so that you could calm down. And then it was just like, oh, both of those things felt great.
Oh, that's great. And in fact, I learned, because I do consider myself a meditator, but I learned many years ago that I had to do yoga first and then meditate. So it's the same idea. You do the exercise first, you get in your body, you get out of your head that's going zzz,
yes,
and then you can calm down. That's a great tip. That is a great tip. All right, now we went all around. So back to, you were studying. Oh, you were going to become a social worker, I think, or a therapist.
Yes. And I did earn my master's, but while I was in my second year, I dusted off the video camera and I worked for a very well sex abuse prevention program. So I was interviewing a perpetrator one-on-one with the video camera. He agreed to it. And then I played the videotape back. And what I saw was there was so much information in his body language that he wasn't telling me. In other words, I bought his con that he wasn't, and I was like, oh, I don't know. I think he's innocent. Like, and then I played the videotape back and I'm like, oh, I miss all that body language.
Wow.
I became enamored with motion images. That was in 1992. And when I graduated from the School of Social Welfare here at the University of Albany, I graduated and I said to my parents, what I want is I want to chip in and buy a video camera. And I got a high-end camera and I moonlighted while I worked as a social worker in school settings. And I launched Videos for Change that year.
You moonlighted? What do you mean you moonlighted? Moonlighted doing what?
Well, advancing my what was then a hobby, video production, but I was serious about it. I read magazines.
What kind of things were you videoing, if that's the word, videotaping?
So by 1993, I interviewed my first subject, Jack Ledley, Adirondack woodsman. And I became enamored. Again, I'm watching the tape and he's standing outside his bark shanty in Speculator, New York, population 300. And he says, I'm living on the wrong side of the Adirondacks. Now, I didn't review that clip for over a year.
Mm,
I went back to him. I said, what do you mean you're living on the wrong side of the Adirondacks?
mm,
Well, that bark shanty that he built was dedicated to his ancestors because they had a bark shanty in his wife's family.
is a bark shanty, you mean a shanty that's built out of bark?
Bark for the roof and
Uh-huh.
the sides,
Uh-huh.
and it's built next to a hearth, a rock, so you can have a fire inside. It's,
Uh-huh.
you don't want to have an accident. It's balsam. It'll go up
Uh,
in flames.
right, right.
But this is how his ancestors taught him how to live close to the land.
Mm,
And what I learned was in the land swap deal between New York State and private and the paper company, where the local people could have access to land, access to their cabin. When that land swap deal took place, all the people who had their camps and shanties up there got kicked out and lost access to this wilderness because it became public and you couldn't have a man-made structure on it. So that then opens me up to another 4 years of making Inside the Blue Line and what his life is about as an Adirondack woodsman, going backwards in time, trying to preserve the old ways and living close to the land. And
mm. Oh, I love hearing this story. So I just want to go back a little bit. So when you were studying to be a social worker and you videotaped the perpetrator and you saw the difference between, oh, I saw an innocent person and then my video showed me something different. What do you think was happening there? How do you explain that?
well, it might have been my attention deficit that I really wasn't paying it. I wasn't listening in a certain way.
Mm,
And I, I really wasn't watching his behavior. I think we can see things, when we get, replay, we learn a lot
mm.
about people's behavior. And
Oh, it's because you're watching footage repeatedly. Yeah. It's funny because when you told the story, the first thing that came to my mind was there's a show called Lie to Me series. It's a few years, 15 years old. And it's about this very, very successful doctor of some kind. I don't know what he's a doctor of. But he is an expert in facial expressions.
Yes.
And I really loved this series. And then I found out that I knew somebody who was the actual doctor's assistant.
Mm-hmm.
And that person actually lived in San Francisco and actually did what the show does. The show is based on him. Yeah, and so they'll be doing a story. It'll always be some crime is being solved, and then they'll have the person. Let's say the person is shocked, and then they'll do quick flash of 3 people who are famous in that same facial expression, and it's just fascinating to me. But so I think you're saying that when you slowed down enough to watch the footage, you could see all of the facial expressions and the body language that had gone over your head the first time,
That's
right?
right.
That's really fantastic. But it was something about the power of that that said to you, "Oh, I got to do more of this videotaping thing." But
Absolutely.
what but
Absolutely.
did you continue at all with that line of I'm gonna find people out? Because that's a very interesting moment that happened there.
Well, I just became enamored with motion image. I got a Sony
Mm,
701 high 8 camcorder, and then Jack became my subject, where I would just
right.
as much as I could and just start videotaping him. Um,
One of the things that you've told us about this film is how you went about marketing in it after you had made it. So these days, everybody. By the way, what year are we talking now? Still not 2000, right?
Right. The movie comes out in 1998, February 98. Yep.
Right. So this was pre what we think is normal today of the streaming services and, you know, because we still use the phrase straight to video back then. Straight to video isn't even a derogatory term anymore. You know, it's like we had COVID, nothing went to theaters.
You know, words like 3/4 inch, half inch, you know, those things were what, you know, those things were around. Tape, exactly, for broadcast.
Yeah, yeah. So you finished the film about your woodsman and that really that whole history, it sounds like, of the Adirondacks. And so how did you go about getting distribution for your film? What did distribution look like for that film?
You know, it was a real struggle to get to my very first film festival. There's so much rejection, you know,
Right.
and I remember getting that rejection letter from Sundance. I thought I was crushed. Uh,
Ah.
I had put so much time and effort.
Yeah, back then, I always say this to people, you know, back then in 1998, every filmmaker wanted their film to get into Sundance.
Yep.
Nowadays, nobody says that at all. Nowadays, then it became, I want to get my film onto Netflix. That lasted for about a decade. Now it's, I want to make a series.
Oh, yes, that's true.
Yeah.
Yes,
But
exactly.
back then it was, I want to get my film into Sundance. And I think your reaction to getting the rejection letter is really what a lot of filmmakers really thought back then. In fact, the people, the first film I ever got into distribution, the people just really thought they were going to get into Sundance. They really believed that.
I had been invited. So in the middle of this, in 1992, I get my master's in social work. In 1995, I start a network for filmmakers in upstate New York because there's nothing here, called Upstate Independence. And in 1996, we start to have guests. And one of those guests was a guy named John Pearson. Um, and he had just come out with a book called Spike, Mike, Slackers, and Dykes. And we had our meeting
Oh, yeah.
in Borders, and he must have sold 60 copies. We had like 65 people a month coming to our meeting. And then I get a letter. He invites me to his Cold Spring workshop down,
Uh,
and I'm one of 65 filmmakers from across the country.
mm,
People like Chris Smith are in that group.
mm,
Where's Chris Smith?
mm-hmm,
Michael Barker's there.
mm.
A guy named Gill from Miramax, Mark Gill. Jeff Gilmore from Sundance is there. I meet everybody in the industry. Bob Hawke, and I'm like, holy cow, what am I doing here? I'm like, I had this 13-minute inside the blue line demo that John said, like, wow, this is great. I want you to come here. So it was a 2-day workshop.
Mm.
And it was then that I thought, well, maybe I've got a shot at Sundance.
Right.
I apply and it doesn't work out. But that just makes me like fight
Huh.
even more
Uh-huh.
for just my career. And the film eventually gets into the Vermont International Film Festival, where I meet the actress Tantu Cardinal of Dances with Wolves. And she gives me an endorsement for my film, which then goes on the jacket cover, which then goes part of my distribution plan. And then I start selling VHS at the time to gift shops throughout the Adirondacks. I must have had a list of 50 gift shops. I'd get in the car with my boxes.
What made you even think of gift shops? How did you put that two and two together?
Um, I had taken a course on marketing your video,
Ah,
and also I took a distribution course with Deborah Zimmerman down in New York, Doug Block, and you know, the do-it-yourself method wasn't necessarily there, but I was learning how to, that I needed to, I needed to
But
do
what
this.
was it about the gift shops that you
Uh,
thought, oh, that would work,
I just
as
always,
opposed to, yeah, go ahead.
well, the Adirondacks is a place where families go in the summertime, and you always leave with a silver
On
needle.
vacation, it's a place people go in the summer. They go there for the nature, right?
Exactly. That's how we got introduced to the Adirondacks. Our whole neighborhood would go and camping, and you'd go to the store, and you want to take a piece of the Adirondacks home
Mm-hmm,
with you. And
mm-hmm,
and I thought this would make a really good takeaway home. Back then, VHS were pretty popular.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And there was a local theater up there called the Adirondack Picture Show, and I four-walled it there, and up 20 miles at Indian Lake, they had a theater. And so I'd have these screenings, and I have screenings throughout the Adirondacks, and successfully applied for a distribution grant through New York State Council of the Arts, which
Mm.
paid for the packaging and the marketing, and I had the poster. I love being involved in all aspects. So
Right.
right down to the jacket cover, which is the poster cover, which is the tagline, which is
That's so great. Would you consider yourself an extrovert, Mike?
I think I'm more an introvert. However, I do have like a sales kind of
Ah,
ability.
yeah.
I
So
mean,
once you got your video into these 50 gift shops, did you have to keep resupplying? Did you have to keep that relationship going with the 50 gift shops?
yes, and the way to do that is to call them in the spring to get them ready for like June coming up. Like that's when the tourism start to come back. Definitely hit them again in by July, because
Mm.
that's when the people are back at their camps, and they're flush with cash, so they're ready to take on some inventory, and then catch them one more time before Labor Day, which is the end of the season. So I might follow up with them in August to see if they need 6 more videos, and usually sold them in the minimum of 6. And then DVDs came out, and then I went back to them. I said, let's DVDs moving, let's keep this going.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I was in about 50 gift shops, and I think it kind of, I didn't think anything of it. I just always thought that, yeah, it could work. And I followed that up with another documentary on the Adirondacks called How to Make an Adirondack Pack Basket, and just dropped that right into the channels the stores that I had
Right.
built the relationship with.
That's so great. Can you just tell us what a pack basket is?
Oh my gosh. Hold on.
I think we're going to be seeing an actual pack basket.
There you
Oh,
go.
that is gorgeous.
It's handmade.
That is gorgeous.
And then this is the greeting card that Jack would send me for Christmas.
Mm.
I
So
mean,
that's his art. Is that his art? The card is
yeah,
his art.
this is hand drawn
Mm-hmm.
greeting cards.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Who does that? Who other artists, some, and so uh
So one of the things that I see a lot with filmmakers is that, how do I say this? So they have an idea for a film, and they when they talk to me, they start to realize, wait a minute, is there an audience for this film? Is there a market? And they have never really considered it. But the truth is filmmakers really want people to see their films.
right.
Filmmakers really are making films so people watch them. And so what I'm hearing here is you studied marketing, you studied distribution, you got the distribution grant, and then you were willing to put in all this effort with those 50 stores, and I'm sure there were other places, to build those relationships and keep those relationships going. But now you know there's a market. You may as well make another movie
Exactly.
because there's a
That's right.
market there, and you've
Sure.
already got that going?
It was totally possible. So I also came out with a CD soundtrack
Ah,
to a documentary. I'm like, who does that? It's just like, yeah, I just like, so I hyper focused on this. I just thought everybody needs to have the Adirondack CD soundtrack. Yeah.
I love that. I love that. Everybody needs this. Everybody needs this.
Trust me, my parents and my family were like, oh my God, enough about your Inside the Blue Line. Okay, we're walking away. We don't want to hear about it. I was like, hey, let's pull over. There's a gift shop. I don't know them yet. And I would go in there and I would sell them. Like, yeah, okay.
Right.
Oh.
It's great. It's great. So after you made the second documentary, did you feel as though you had sort of run out of runway? There was no more Adirondack movies to make. What did you do next?
Well, I started in Jack's Pack Basket Workshop. I met with two other guys and we launched the History of Adirondack Fire Towers, a documentary called From the Mountaintop.
There's
And
more Adirondacks. I mean, I would think the Adirondacks could supply stories for the rest of your life.
exactly. My dad said, well, maybe they'll be the Ansel Adams of the Adirondacks. However, Joanne, we ran into 9/11, right?
Oh,
September. And I did not know you. And the Adirondack Museum and all the other funding sources, if you recall, things just disappeared. I had put my movie, this third movie, on a credit card and another credit card, and that's where things kind of like, oh, you can't do that. That starts to, you got to find other ways. And
uh-huh.
and I accrued quite a bit of debt. It's
Mm.
still a wonderful project, and I've got a teaser for it. It needs to be told, so that's still in the
Another Adirondack project
yes,
is waiting to go. Mm.
yes.
If you were to make that today, how would you do things differently post 9/11?
Well, okay, so let me just tell you a little story. In order to fly, okay, so the fire towers, the history of Adirondack fire towers, these are man-made structures on top of mountains that are
Right.
4,600 feet in the air or 4,000 feet in the air. DEC, the Department of Environmental Conservation, I was able to communicate with them, and I was able to get the governor to green light me working with the conservation department to put us in a helicopter and fly around the fire towers. That was the only way we could get to them.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Now, today you have drones. So it's so much easier. And you could do a beautiful job with fire towers. And to be honest, you could do a 45-minute musical montage of fire towers and people would watch that. I just think it's just spectacular up there because from those fire towers, you get these beautiful views of the lakes and things like that. So going forward, I would certainly make use of the lower cost drones and dipping back into history, looking at how these man-made structures help preserve the largest forest preserve in the world. So the tension between man and environment was always, that was the earliest, that was the foundation of Jack having lost his hunting camp.
Right.
And so now this is a similar theme of public and private land and this how do we live together?
It's funny whenever anybody tells me about a project, because I actually haven't heard you talk about this project before, but I start to see up in the kind of right-hand corner of my site, I start to see a budget with income coming in. And so this project fits very, very squarely into funding around environment and climate change and things like that, which is a particular niche, that's very interesting and very strong. The funding in that niche is very important, because not only are we battling climate change, we're also battling climate change denial. So that's definitely an area of funding that's available for a project like that may not have been available back in those days.
I think you bring up a really great point, which is, how do you frame your subject in a manner that speaks to stories that people want to hear now? How do you integrate the history behind this, and what were the preservation goals back then of New York State? Why did they set aside all this land? But what does it mean to us today? And why? And you're bringing in this climate is the number one concern of Gen Z right now. They're really this young next generation is very concerned about that. So framing the history of Adirondack fire towers along those lines, I think it's brilliant, because now it's fundable, right?
Yes. It's fundable for sure.
That's great.
It's always fundable.
Yes.
I mean, it's rare that somebody tells me a movie. I mean, often, a filmmaker will say, well, I want to make a film about my mother, and I like to say, oh, and how many people are going to buy that? Your second cousin twice removed and your auntie, and they're like, oh, because it's never a film about their mother. It's about something else. I have a client right now making a film about his mother, but it's actually about the lack of African Americans in science.
Oh, beautiful. There you go.
So it's sort of about his mother, but it's about this big, huge topic, so that's just a marketing issue. But I think that, every film is fundable. It's just a question of what's the path to the funding, because if you went a different direction with the film and you said, oh, this is going to be about history, then that's a different set of funding.
Right, exactly. Marketing is so important, and I think that's why I was successful early on. I had a consultant, Vicky Naralamasang, and she did a lot of the commercials, TV, radio spots, and she sat down with me and she shifted how to frame this Adirondack woodsman. And it was around, have you ever experienced the wilderness? Have you ever, wanted to take it home with you? And it was, have you ever experienced the call of a loon? And when you hear that loon on a lake, you're in wilderness, and you're in this place. And now, what if that place is threatened? And we rewrote on the back of the jacket. And so when people go to the video store and they read this, it's like, oh my gosh, I need that.
I got to take my piece of the wilderness home with me. That's great. That's great. Same movie, different marketing.
That's right. So marketing, and what we learn through your training is and how we speak about what we're working on, helps us shake the money tree.
Yeah, because we're not necessarily thinking about what's on the jacket at the end, but how we're going to market the film in terms of how to raise the money for the film is marketing. It's still marketing, so the film may not be made yet, but we're marketing the film that's going to be made to the funders, whether they're individuals or foundations or whoever they are. We are marketing to them our project. So now 9/11 hits and your whole business goes, down the tube. What did you do then? Because apparently you stayed in film.
Yeah, I had jumped ship from being a social worker. I got out of it in 1999, and I went into and launched Videos for Change full time.
Mm.
And
What is Videos for Change?
that's my production company. And
Well, that's not exactly, my business just fell apart. That's the opposite. That's the opposite of my business fell apart. It's like, okay, I'm gonna make this into a real business.
yeah, yeah.
That's great. That's great. That's a great response.
So the CD comes out, the pack basket comes out. Somebody gets wind that because I have maple syrup footage from Jack, he
Huh.
makes his own maple syrup. The governor of New York at that time, George Pataki, was a big advocate of the Adirondacks, and so I did the first video on New York maple syrup. And everybody thinks of Vermont as the leader in maple syrup, yet New York had just won the Maple Rama
Huh.
contest. So they needed a video. And so I was the guy, and I got the governor. And so I made a promo video for maple syrup. Now, but I knew how to also distribute it.
Back to the gift shops.
It went to all the maple syrup producers
Oh,
across the
yeah.
state.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
We have gift shops, and some of them
Uh-huh.
bought a TV with a little VHS player so that this 13-minute video would play in their gift shop, and people would be leaving with containers of maple syrup.
So, and a video.
Yes,
They could take home the maple syrup and the video.
yes. And because I knew enough about educational distribution, it had a study guide. We created a study guide, and
Mm.
we got it into classrooms in New York State. And New York State history is studied in the 4th and 7th grade and in high school. But it went along with, here, take a field trip to go and visit your local maple syrup producer.
Wow. So, I don't think I have ever had anybody on my podcast use the phrase educational distribution. So what do you mean that you said, well, I knew about educational distribution? How did you learn about that?
Well, I think that was in my course with Deborah Zimmerman, which was taught
Mm,
at Film and Video Arts in New York City.
mm.
And so I would go down and study and take different courses. And distribution was key, educational distribution. Doug Block.
How would you describe educational distribution?
Well, from a financial standpoint, if I was going to sell a VHS tape in a store, I might sell it for $24.95.
Mm-hmm.
But then I learned about the library market, your local library, which the person who's making the decision usually has a threshold of $50 or less. They don't have to go to a committee. So I could sell the video at $49.95, and they could just buy this video. Or I could go to the university market, which includes public performance rights. And so that video at the university, the same video could sell for $149. Or inside the Blue Line's case, that could sell for $495. So you go from $24.95 to $495. And at that time, universities had budgets like that for educational public performance rights. And I was like, whoa, that's
And that's a license or a sale? Do they get to keep the video, or do they just show it the one time and pay the licensing fee?
they get to keep it, and they could charge admission or not. If they're a college, they're charging admission by students going there, and they could show it to the public.
And so when you talk about educational distribution, were you doing this one library at a time?
Well, they're like the shops. I studied like lists of libraries, right. And sometimes it was a phone call. Sometimes they discovered me. They part of the educational market is getting a review in, I think it was School Library Journal, and so the industry magazine. Somebody would,
wow, yeah.
And I had a fulfillment place. At first, I had a fulfillment house, and they would send those videos out, and I'd get a check. After a while, I just took over that. So purchase orders would come to me, and I would fulfill them and ship them. And I can shrink wrap a DVD when
With one hand.
there you
I can
go.
shrink wrap a DVD with my left hand.
That's it. I mean, I said I like to get involved in everything, and it's almost like I need to, it's a little.
Well, I think it's actually very interesting because, as I said, nowadays we're all about, streaming and digital, and but I always think that as an artist, that there's a real benefit to having a balance between the creative brain and then doing something that I think of as very left brain. Wrapping a DVD is not necessarily left brain, but there's this sort of balance between that creativity, be editing, and then being with the physical copies and sending them out and going and driving around and talking. That's a nice balance, I think.
It was, and you experience success, so you want to just keep doing it, and you start to develop a pattern. When after this came Battles of Saratoga, the historic documentary on the Revolutionary War, and so that led to a whole different set of gift shops. And so you start to understand what is the traffic pattern for historic sites. And the next thing you know, your next project, I was down in Jamestown, Virginia, wherever there was a Rev War site, I just knew to call those gift shops, and they would pick it up and purchase 6 or 18 copies of a DVD. I mean, that's a pretty good order back then.
Has that market completely gone now, or do gift shops still sell? Because I'm sure you notice whenever you go into a gift shop what they're selling.
It's slowed down dramatically. I don't, in fact, I'm guilty of not even pushing that aspect of my business as much. So,
but do gift shops still sell DVDs?
They do. Yep, they still have them. I think they sit on their shelves a little bit longer, a lot longer.
Yeah. People are perhaps not thinking about that. I want to have this piece. They're not thinking of it in that same sense of, I want this piece to take with me.
Right. They can find it on their phone or stream it. Where can I get it online?
Yeah. So how did you get involved with the films? Like, as you are, I see the poster behind you. How did you get involved in those kind of films? The ones that went to Sundance particularly.
So I got a call one day from our local film commissioner and said, could you come down? Michael Winterbottom is in town and he needs to be shown where to scout some locations. So I was just filling in and I'm like, oh, this is a pretty cool gig. And then from there was asked to do other location work. And
I did locations for a while. I loved it.
It's awesome.
Thought it was great. Yeah.
Well, there you get to be by yourself. You go out and so I'll never forget August 10th, 2015, the producers of As You Are, I get a call. They're like, we want to make a movie. I said, when are you starting? They said September 12th. I asked, how many locations do you need? It was like 25 or 26. I knew enough. So I said, give me your top 5 locations and I'll get started. And by September 12th, we had most of those 25 locations that they needed. It was a record pace. We started filming. There was still some other missing locations, but you get them while you start shooting. And we wrapped film in October 9th. And they were editing as we were going. And Sundance knew the producers, the West Coast producers, and said, send us what you got. The key location to secure was this rock quarry, where this we, and this is where I learned where you put your money.
Mhm.
Had a drone, a stunt coordinator, we had a scuba guy down in the water, had to have an ambulance. I mean, these are all things that go into locations and planning. You got to get porta johns. You've got to be able to access this place. You got to deal with the owner who now wants another $1,000 per day for this site. And this was the money shot to get these two kids in slow-mo, lift this drone up, go off this cliff. This is what they sent to Sundance. And they're like, we want it. We want the rest of the.
They sent that scene.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Uh-huh.
And then they were just racing. So from October 9th, we wrap. They submit it to Sundance by November, and December 3rd, they get in. And January 26th, they win the special grand jury prize. I was like, nobody makes a movie in 6 months and wins the Sundance grand jury prize, special grand jury prize. That was like a movie miracle. It was just like, and the doggedness of just staying on task. That's when I learned that a movie can fall into a particular department's hands at any given moment. And sometimes it starts with locations. You got to have a place, but then it can go to your costumer, your DP, your actors. At some point, the balance of this movie is going to shift to someone in a key moment, and it just has to keep going. And that movie had all that, and was able to come together with the direction of Miles Parafit, and who's now, I think, made 3 features. And fasten your seatbelt, because it's just about getting it done. And what was like 6-day shoots. So
I just want to make sure, if anybody has a question, please come on video, raise your hand. Otherwise I'll keep going. But yeah, if you have a question. So tell us now, Mike, what you're working on now.
So my focus is on a documentary project near and dear to me, called Brown and White, The Heart of Bona's Basketball. And this is the story of the smallest college basketball team ever to reach what's called the Final Four, and also go on to win the National Invitational Tournament, which was held every year at Madison Square Garden. Take one of college basketball's greatest programs, Kentucky Wildcats, to double overtime, only to fall into national scandal in 2003 because they had this player who all he had was a welding certificate. It wasn't a high school diploma. And then it's about how this little school rebounds into national relevance. And we're entering post-production now, having a great effort, success now. Earlier, just before this call, I was on with Adidas. Last night I finished up with a grant. It felt so good to get that done. I just really appreciate you just pushing us forward, and we have a plan, and we need that kind of guidance. I think filmmakers need that. And have a screening date October 18th in the fall. We're going to bring a work in progress back to campus. And, we're still in the process of raising $300,000, but in time for a national broadcast on PBS, presenting station through Buffalo, Toronto. And, I just got off the phone with Adidas, and they're like, they're starting to connect the dots of how this can have what's called impact producing, reaching the younger audience, age, Gen Z, age 14 to 22. That's where they want to be in the sneaker business. That's where I want to be in the educational business. And I can start to feel things lining up, which is really a great thing, particularly, where we started with the show, which is, you go through periods where you're stuck and you're depressed. You're like, you're like, what the heck? national disasters come at you, and I like 9/11 or in 2008 the market crashes, and it's like you got to have a multi-pronged plan. That's what I get out of with Filmmaker Success and what you teach us, and that just gets me excited because I'm ready to roll, but if I get stuck, man, it's you get shut down. So this is really a blessing to have a roadmap with this project, and we're talking about others, and I can see them coming back to life, which is just great.
Yeah. It's been great working with you, and now I feel as though I've got more detail about your work as a filmmaker, and I think that for this film, all those skills that you developed doing all that marketing, it's going to be in a different way this time, but it's still a lot of experience that you have to bring to the table, with that marketing piece. And that's often the next place that filmmakers get stuck, is with the marketing, and I always tell my clients, it's really up to you. There's like a continuum. Do you want to be, like Mike, full on with the marketing, or, where are you on this continuum? And I have this one client who said, I'm doing nothing. Then over time, he started to realize, oh, I have to do something,
That's
I
right.
have to do something.
Oh, that's right.
And now I also like to see that my filmmakers have a budget for marketing, because that's another place that we can fall down, is to miss out on getting the word out about films, because we can't rely on the distributors to do that. So
I studied with Dov Simmons early in the late 90s, and he said, get this through your head. This industry is three things. First, it's marketing. Second, it's marketing. And third, it's marketing. And you know what? I got it. So it's like, I got it to a degree, but understanding how to fundraise, that's the key to being in business.
Well, Dov Simmons has the model of like, do it for 20,000, or is it 10,000? What's his number that he uses?
It might be like that. And you write like 7 checks or something like that. It's easy. Just write these 7 checks or that's it.
But yeah, that's his model, is to make something for very little money. My model is more about, well, what do you think you can raise? Because if whatever you think you can raise, we can raise that.
And that gives me like a lot of hope. One of the things that I've learned with you early on was I have a tendency to drift towards the negativity. And I think a lot of filmmakers do too. It's like, well, it's not.
A lot of humans.
There we go. Yeah, we drift to like, that's not possible because of this or with that person, and breaking through that is really important.
Woohoo! Marcy's gonna ask a question.
Yeah.
Yay, Marcy. So good to see you.
Hi, good morning.
Hi,
nice to see you too. Mike, thank you for coming. Real quick, I'm a San Diego filmmaker with my film, The Power of Sports for Amputees, is in post-production. And it's about 3 people who have lost their leg limbs and they're looking to participate or compete in sports. And if they have the right tools, their success is unlimited. And one of my things that I'm grappling with is time. I'm in I'm in editing. What do you think is the right amount of time to showcase your documentary? Not on PBS, I know they have specific times, but any other distribution?
You know what? I'm not understanding your question then, Marcy. Do you mean what is the length?
The length of time, yeah, sorry. The length of time.
Where are you seeing it right now? Where do you think it's gonna fall?
I'm looking at 1 hour and 40 minutes, but right now it's 2.5 hours and I need to cut it.
Okay, let's see what Mike has to say.
Well, my first documentary was 90 minutes, and it actually really took off when I cut it down to 56 minutes and I got it onto PBS. And I was in love with the 90 minutes, but you know what? The shorter one was better. So you want to think about where you want to go with it and what they would like to see. Now, PBS would like to see a 56:40 for an hour. That leaves the balance for underwriting and other announcements. So you want to think about that. Do you have a sense of where you want it to go distribution wise?
I am thinking about the educational distribution like you have done in the university libraries. In the classrooms, I know it may have to be an after the classroom, or maybe they can show it in 2 parts, the first day and then a second day type of thing.
Yep.
In the PBS world, 56 minutes is the right number. And in the classroom world, you want to either have a shorter version for the classroom, or they can just show a piece. But I think that when you're at an hour and 40 minutes, it probably doesn't make any sense to you, the idea of making a 56-minute film.
Yeah.
But think of it like this. Think of it like this. So PBS is out there saying, hey, Marcy, we want to show your film. We want your film. It's got to be 56 minutes. Now, what would you do? But that's the reality.
The process of trimming it down. I mentioned that we started the AIVF salon up here. So there was a network of us filmmakers, and in between monthly meetings, we get together and watch each other's stuff, and we'd have screenings, and we'd have like sessions where like, what can I cut? What do I need to cut? And so in your San Diego market, if there are people there, or you can find some people online, you want to start sort of that little mini committee to figure out how to trim it down and what other people think ought to go and what needs to stay. And you also might get some good marketing ideas as you're reviewing it as to where else can this go. Mm-hmm. Does this fall into the Special Olympics category?
No, because this is for people with an actual physical loss of the limb. It's not intellectual, which is the Special Olympics.
Okay.
This is, it would go into the Paralympics.
Paralympics.
Okay.
Side.
Yeah.
And that's another issue, is not issue, but it's I'd love to get this out in time, because the Paralympics will be in Paris at the end of August, beginning of July.
This year.
Well, I love Mike's suggestion about, and I have another, I didn't even realize I should have introduced him before, but I have another client who's a documentary filmmaker in San Diego.
Oh.
Yes. So I'll introduce you to her.
Okay.
But it's really a decision, the decision is, do I want to have an hour and 40-minute documentary, or do I want to have a show on PBS? It's a decision, and as I said, and if somebody was holding out a check, you would probably say, now PBS is not going to hold out a check, but there are ways of raising money to be on PBS. So it's something to really consider, what the market is for your film and where it's going to be shown. And then there are obviously organizations that are going to be very interested in this.
Oh, for sure. And streaming it as well. But I believe I'm going to go the event side, the community event first.
Yes.
And go to select markets and show it there, where there's a population of those who are amputees, and colleges as well, colleges that offer classes so people can go into that field, and those colleges that actually have competitive teams participating in adaptive sports. going to them, going to where the market is, I think, to start off.
Yeah, and all of this happens before traditional distribution.
Sure.
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah. You know, you sound like a different person, Marcy. It's so good to see you.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the confidence, because you've got the film now. It's like, well, do I make it this length or this length? Or it's just so great to hear you sound so clear and precise about what you're doing.
Oh, well, thank you, Joanne. You're a big part of that.
I
No,
imagine
thank you.
that there's a need or a void. One of the things that they would say about our work, whether it was Battle of Saratoga, is that we filled in a historical void in the library of what's out there. And so along those lines, you're going to fill some kind of void in the world of amputees, and partnering with those other organizations. I think you're going to be able to cultivate an audience and build a community around it. And it just takes partnering and finding out from them, what is their needs right now, are their needs, and then packaging a program around that to raise awareness. They might want a 30-minute and or you take your 56, but then you can stop it and do a 30 talk and show and tell kind of thing.
Okay.
So that might be another way to develop partners and an outreach strategy. And next thing you know, you're on the road going to screenings and talking
And going to gift shops.
I really like that, Mike. I thought, maybe I should go to the hospitals where they're actually doing the amputation. And have the video in the hospital gift shops, because it gives a wealth of information about next steps to do if you do get an amputation.
So thinking about this, is not just the person that's the amputee, but it's the family members. They want to know, how can I help my family member? And so there's one amputee, but there might be 10 family members who want to you want to help them understand how to interact with this family member.
And a lot of what's in Marcy's film is about providing this information about how amputees can get this super expensive equipment, and so that's a lot of the information that's coming in the film. Yeah.
So Joanne, could there be a corporate underwriter partnership of this expensive equipment to get behind this, because they want to get that out?
And that's where, and this is like, I think what lit you up as well when you and I started working together was, and that's why working with PBS becomes exciting, because when the corporation knows that the film is going to be on PBS, now they have a really big reason to want to put their product on the film.
It's great. It's like, oh my gosh, dust off old PBS, because it's really the new thing, I think, right now for independent filmmakers. When things have dried up, and PBS is, I think it's cool.
Yeah, I really like that. This new film you're having with Brown and White, with the team, the small little get from behind team that just surprised the industry. I'm looking forward to watching that.
Well,
there you go, a raving fan. Thank you so much, Marcy. So good to see you. And thank you very much, Mike, for coming and sharing all your stories. Thanks, Emily, for doing all the tech stuff. And oh gosh, somebody wrote us a big, okay. I have a great difficulty with dealing with things in the chat, but thank you so much for coming, Maroti. That's right. Thank you, Maroti, for coming. Where are you calling in from, Maroti? Graduate of Villanova University. anyway, lovely to have you. And I'll try and read that. Okay, Baltimore. Lovely to have you. I'll try and read all of that paragraph eventually. So bye, Mike. And thank you so much for sharing all your stories and all your hard filmmaking work.
Thank you so much, Joanne. It was a pleasure to be here, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye.